Hello guys, welcome back to my channel. This is Lenti Zoe Nani and I'm your friend Nani. Guys, if you're visiting this channel for the first time, you're welcome and I hope you get hooked to this channel. Now please like, share this video, press the subscribe button and also turn on the notification bell so you get notified each time I upload a new video. To all my returning subscribers, you guys are the real MVP. I love you guys so much. Today I bring you another exciting tutorial on how to make a senator outfit for a boy or a girl child. Now I'm working with 1 yard of fabric and the length is by 22, so I'm using this plain material to spice it up. So this should take care of the senator wear for the age I'm working with. This is for a child of 1 year and 4 months. Your child's measurement might be bigger or smaller, so make sure you take the measurements correctly. Now the measurements I'll be needing for this senator is right there on the screen, so you might want to look at it carefully, copy it down so you know the measurements you would need when making your own senator wear. Alright, so I'm folding my fabric into two using the biggest circumference around the body, and for a child it's basically the same thing for the waist and the chest. Okay, so they don't really have so much shape now, so it's just the same thing. I want to make it the same thing so that the senator is free. You know, they wear it from the bottom down, so it's free for them to wear. Alright, so from the top of my fabric I'll be marking a straight line at the top of my fabric, and that will be my starting point for this senator wear. Okay, now if you notice the senator, the back is usually longer than the front by at least 2 inches. The back overlaps into the front, so for this reason I'll be taking out 2 inches from all my vertical measurements. So I'll be placing 2 inches on my starting point, then from there I'll start taking my vertical measurements. And for the vertical measurements, all I need here is basically just the length of the senator wear, which is 15 inches. I want to make it longer and by using 16 inches, but then this is the same fabric I'll be using for the back, so I want to measure that to be sure that I'll have what will make up for the back, and it's not, so I will stick to the 15 inches, which is the original length of this senator wear. So I'll be marking 15 inches. Remember, I'll take out 2 inches from my measurement, so I'll mark 15 inches here, then I'm adding 1.5 inches as the hemming allowance for this senator. So I'll go ahead and straighten out these lines so that they'll be more visible, so that we'll know what we're doing. So now for this senator, I'm not marking any half length, but you could decide to measure your child, know where the half length is, take the waist measurement around there, or basically still apply the chest measurement on the half length if you want. So the next thing I'll be doing is to mark my chest line, and the chest line is derived by dividing the chest measurement by 6 plus 1.5. So remember, we are still taking out 2 inches, and that point is my chest line. So I'm also extending the measurements into a straight line. Now the next thing I'm going to do is to mark half of my shoulder measurement plus half-inch seam allowance to join the sleeve. Now I'll be also marking the same thing on the chest line, just so that I'll have a straight line running across the shoulder and the chest line. Now that would take care of my armhole. Alright, now on the chest line I'll be marking quarter of the chest measurement on the chest line plus 1 inch for ease. That is to say, I'll be marking my chest measurement divided by 4 plus 1 inch ease allowance. You know, it's a senator, so it has to be free, then plus 1 inch for my normal side seam allowance. I hope that is clear. Now the same thing I've marked here, I would mark on the length of the fabric. Remember, it's the same thing. The measurement is the same thing both for the tummy, the chest, and the hip. So I'll be basically marking the same thing. So I'm supposed to connect this into a straight line, but remember that I'll be needing a bit of allowance for my side slit. The senator is supposed to have a slit at the back, at the side, so I'm coming up by 3.5 inches from the senator length, and I'll mark that there. So Then on that point, I'll still mark the same thing I have on my chest and on the length of the senator. Okay, so then I'll connect into a straight line. Now the reason for coming up by 3 inches is to mark the point where I would have my side slit. So the extra allowance there is what I'll be using for the side slit allowance. Okay, I have limited fabric, so I'm just making use of that 1 inch remaining there. So this 1 inch will take care of the side slit allowance. All right, so the next thing would be to draft the armhole. So I'm going to measure what I have there and mark quarter of, sorry guys, so the next thing to do is my shoulder slope. All right, so I'm marking 1 inch for the child, for a child, and I'm connecting it straight to the top. Then afterwards I'll add ½ inch for joining the shoulder together. Okay, so I want to do this before I do my armhole curve. All right, so that has taken care of whatever seam allowance I'll be needing to join the front shoulder. Now I'll measure what I have left after the shoulder slope, mark half of that, then come in by ½ inch, then curve out my armhole. It's as easy as that, guys. Sorry I tried to confuse you earlier. All right, so having done that, if you have enough fabric, 2 inches should be enough for your side slit allowance. But even if you have 1 inch, it is still very much okay. And while we are sewing this, you would see that my 1 inch is enough for my side seam. So I start cutting now and cut through the front. Then I'm taking up the side slit allowance to the armhole, cut out the shoulder allowance. And that is it for the front. So you can see how I cut. If you have any part that you did not trim out carefully, just make sure you trim that out carefully. So I'm folding the fabric for the back, then I'll place the front on it and make sure that it is properly aligned, like the front and the back are properly aligned. Now you also make sure you have a bit of allowance at the top at the top for the back, because the back is longer than the front. Now remember, the front is shorter by 2 inches, so we'll be paying that back. So 2 inches for the front. Now if the front is shorter by 2 inches, also means that the back is also short by 2 inches. So I'll be adding that up. 2 plus 2 is 4, plus ½ inch for the shoulder joining, that'll be 4.5. So I'm marking 4.5 from the shoulder point. Okay, so I'm marking 4.5 there. So I'll be slanting that line. All right, then I'll cut that off. So what I've just done is to add the 2 inches I took away from the front, the 2 inches that I would replace for it with at the back, then ½ inch for my shoulder joining. It's pretty straight. All right, so what I'll do next is to now trim the back with the front, make sure it's the same thing, it's properly aligned. You can see me matching up my fabric, then cut through to the side seam, to the armhole. Then I'll curve my hand out just so that I don't cut more than I need for the shoulder point. Now I'll fold this so that the ½ inch shoulder joining at the back would overlap the ½ inch shoulder joining at the front of this senator wear. If you have your iron one, you might need to iron this out so that it stays out flat. Okay, so by using my hand to hold it down, then I extend the armhole line to the top. Okay, so after doing that, I would cut it out. Then the next thing we'll be doing is to derive our neckline. Now the neck circumference I'm working with is 11 inches. So to derive your neckline, I'm going to divide 11 inches by 2, and that will give me 5.5. Now because I'll be using a yoke to turn the neckline, I'll subtract 1 inch to get 4.5. But if I'll be piping this neckline, if I'll be just using piping, I wouldn't subtract 1 inch. I'll just do 11 divided by 2 and have 5.5, and that is what I'll use for my neckline. So now I have 4.5. So I'm going to be carving out my tape in form of a semicircle, as you can see from the top point. So I'll start carving it out to 4.5 in form of a semicircle. So you can see the way I'm folding my tape. I'm covering my tape. I'm not folding it. I'm covering it out. English is difficult. Okay, so I'm covering my tape. All right, so I have that point at 4.5, so I'm just covering it out in form of a semicircle. It's not a full circle, just like a curve, and this will give us a round neckline. So now I'll be using my tape to go around it again to make sure I have 4.5, and I'm not sure you're seeing that, so I'll flatten out my tape and make sure it's round, just so that you see. So by the time I get to the center front and the center back, what I have there is 4.5, and that will serve as the neckline. So I'll pick up my scissors and cut. Now, while cutting, you have to be very careful. Watch this carefully. I'm cutting only the front. Okay, I'm picking only the front, then curve it out to only one part of the back. I'm not cutting the entire back. Okay, just one part, and take it to the upper. So I'm opening this now so that you see, then cut it out to that point. All right, so even if you did not know even if you don't understand what I said, you saw what I did. All right, so that is it. So you place it carefully. Now if there is any point you did cut properly, you just go in with your scissors and trim that out. So I'm placing everything together to make sure that everything properly aligns, and the parts that I didn't trim off correctly, I'll trim that out. Okay, so this serves as the neckline. Now you can see the round neck. So by the time I open it up, you can see, so when you join the shoulder, it's going to overlap like this and give you this round neckline. If you open it up after joining, you would see the beauty of this neckline. All right, so this saves us the stress of dividing, contemplating what to use for the neckline. So this is the front and the back, so when you join it, it will just overlap like that. Very beautiful. So I'm going to keep this aside and bring out my plain fabric to cut the yoke of this senator wear. So I fold the plain fabric into two, place the front pattern on it, then make sure the sides are properly aligning. Then I'll trace out the neckline and the shoulder line. It's pretty much like when you're cutting your facing. So this is more like a facing. Don't bother that we call it yoke and think it's something different. It's your facing. The only thing is that it's going to be in front of the fabric of the senator wear. Alright, so I'll be marking the length of my yoke, and I'll be using 7 inches for this yoke. You can make yours shorter, you can make it longer, depending on what you try to achieve. So I'll just curve it out like this. Now the shape for your yoke or your facing is also determined by what you want. You can make it slanted, straight, curved, anyhow you want it. Just get creative about it and do what you want. So I'm cutting out the neckline, and that is the facing for the front. So when I place it on the front, you see that it aligns properly. You can see it matching. All right, so I'll keep that aside and also place my fabric on fold for the back. Okay, so I'm just trimming out the excess point just so that I can get enough fabric around there. Oh, that doesn't work, so I'll fold it to the extreme end of this fabric, place the back pattern on it, make sure that all the points are marking, trace out my neckline and my shoulder measurements. I'm just working with what I have left on that fabric. It's pretty small, so I'll just cut it out. Basically the same thing I did for the front, just that the back is smaller because I don't have enough fabric. So what I'll be doing is, you can see it's matching. Okay, so what I'll do is when I'm sewing, I'll just turn the yoke inside. It will be inside, not outside for the back, but the front, the yoke will be outside. Now I want to cut my sleeve, so I folded into two, then folded into another two, just so that I cut the front and back, the two sleeves at the same time. All right, so I'll go back to my bodice. Okay, place the front on the back, slant the shoulder just the way we did it, then measure down the armhole to get us what we'd use to draft our sleeve. So I have 8 inches here, so I'll keep that aside, having 8 inches in mind. So I folded my fabric into two and into another, so that's into 4, to cut the two sleeves at once. Now I'm marking my cap height, and the cap height is derived by dividing your chest measurement by 12 plus ½ inch seam allowance. So that there is my cap height, and I measured it from the top of the fabric. Now the next thing I'll do is to mark what I used as my chest line. So I used 6.6 or thereabouts. I'm marking 6.6 there. So what I'll do is to connect it to the top of the fabric in a slanted line. So that is it, connecting to a slanted line. So what I'm going to do is to measure this slanted line and check what I have there. All right, so I'll still go back to my fabric just to cross check and measure that what I have there is 8 inches. All right, so I'm going to measure what I have here, and I have around 7.5. Okay, so I'm going to divide that into 2. So I just use my tape, divide my tape into 2, and that gets me the midpoint of this slanted line. So I'm going to mark the midpoint there. So on that midpoint, I'll come down by ½ inch. So I'm going to curve from the top in form of an inverted S to meet that ½ inch we came down at the midpoint, then extend it to the edge of the fabric or the line we made there. That's chest line measurement we marked there. All right, so from the top now, I'll now measure to get 8 inches, which is what I got from my fabric. So this is 8 inches here. Okay, so that is 8 inches, as you can see. So then after that, I'll measure the length of my sleeve. So I'm having 5.5 inches as the length of my sleeve. So I'll mark that plus 1½ inches for hemming of the sleeve. So what I'll do is to mark my sleeve circumference, or the round sleeve, divided by 2. So the round sleeve I'm working with is 10 divided by 2 gives us 5. So I'll just mark 5 inches there plus 1.5 inches side seam allowance, and that's pretty much it for the sleeve. And this is the same method you'd use if you want to cut a basic sleeve. So I'll just cut that out, and that is it for my sleeve. Okay, so the next video you'll be seeing is me joining this pretty fabric. So now I want to couple my senator, and I'll start with attaching the yoke. So I've attached the yoke to the front. What I did is to place the right side of the yoke on the wrong side of the fabric, sew it by ½ inch, then turn it around, then stitch it on the front. The same thing for the back, but what I did for the back was that I stitched it inside. The yoke for the back is inside. So this is my sleeve, the 2 sleeves. I've hemmed the sleeve, so you can see the front and the back. Okay, so I'll take that aside. Now this is my placket for the neckline. The placket, I hope you know what the placket means. The line that runs from the neckline down. So that is where you'll be fixing your button or your press button or whatever you're working with. So the width is 4 inches, then the length is 9 inches for my placket. So I went and measured and ironed my fabric. I placed it together and ironed it. So you can see the crease line my iron has formed, and also ironed my placket, and it's also formed a crease line, as you can see. So I'm going to place the placket on the fabric, on the front fabric. So the right side of the placket facing the wrong side of the fabric. So I'm going to use my tape to highlight the middle of the placket just so that you can see what I'm doing. All right, so what I'll do is mark ½ inch on both sides of that middle line. Okay, I'm marking ½ inch on both sides. So I want to get my curve ruler, guys. All right, so I have it here. All right, so I'm going to take it up into a straight line. Then the next thing will be to measure the length of the slit you want. So I want about 6 inches. Now before that, I'll just come down by 1.5 inches from the top of my placket, or even 1 inch, then mark the 6 inches I want. Now the reason I'm marking this 1 or 1.5 inches is just so that my placket will be longer than my fabric, so that by the time I join, I would have the allowance I use to turn the placket. All right, so what you do is to go to your sewing machine and sew on that half-inch line. You sew it round, okay? So from then, at that point, I'll come up by half inch, then make a V like that. Just make a V there. So I stitched the size, the 1.5. So what I'll do is just to cut through the middle of the placket. So when I get to where I marked that V, I'll take it in. It's just like a notch, like so. That's what I just did there. That V shaped is just a notch, like the way you normally notch in. So I'm notching it in, but enough so that it doesn't cut through my seam. I'm also cutting the other part of the V. All right, so I'm cutting it in, but enough not to cut through my seam. So but after doing this, I'll now flip the placket to the front of the senator wear. All right, so when I flip it to the front, you can see what I have there. So you can go ahead now and iron this so that it lays flat. You iron this so that it lays flat. Okay, so remember, I did mention before, but on my placket I used visible interfacing on it. I used paper stay, gum stay to make it firm. So by the time I fold it and use my hand to press on it, it's going to help it to lay flat for me, even if I don't have an iron with me. But it's good that you have your iron while you're making this, so you can be pressing all the seams. All right, so what I'll be doing, you can see that I have an excess at the top. I'll show us what to do with that. To just help us to turn the top of the placket effortlessly. Okay, so I just zoomed in so that we'd see what I'm doing. All right, so what I'll do is on one side of the placket, I'm going to fold in by half inch or even quarter of an inch, then fold it to cover my seam. I'll push the seam I made inwards, then use it to cover it. Then I'm pinning it so it to stay in place. All right, so I want to open it up again. Then at the top part, remember I told us to leave like 1.5 inches. So what I'll do is to stitch that 1.5 inch, that line I made there, stitch it, cut it off so that when I turn it, it will cover the placket. Okay, so another method is to fold in the placket, fold it over. All right, so I'm using the placket to cover my seam, that seam I made there. I hope I'm making sense. I hope you're understanding this. But if you don't, just ask me in the comment section and explain. So you can fold this in if you don't want to cut, if you don't want to stitch that upper part, you can fold that in and stitch it whichever way. But I don't do that because it gets bulky and I don't like it. So after doing, I'll go to my sewing machine and do that. Then on the other side, you can see some pinning it. This has to cover the space you have there. Okay, this you move it to cover whatever space. You can see the space there, so that's this side would cover it up, then you pin it down. Okay, so I'm taking my time to do this. I'm not making it fast. I'm just taking my time to do this. So you see, even if the video gets longer, the most important thing is that I've passed the knowledge across. Now to the other side, I'll fold in or iron in my half inch, then use it to cover up my, you can see my stitch. So I use it to cover it up, pushing the stitch inside. Okay, so I'll also fold that. Then so this would overlap the other sleeve, the other placket. So as you can see, I've used it to cover the other placket. Okay, now what I did for the other side, I also flip to the back, so the 1.5 inch to cover the placket for me, or I can also fold it inside, whichever one you prefer. So look at what I did. So this would overlap, you can see the other placket, so you can fix your button here or your press button here, then do your buttonhole on the other one. So that is it. I'll use my pin to hold it down. Okay, so I'm using the pin to hold it down. You can see how it's overlapping the other one. So I'll also hold it down. Then I'll go to my sewing machine and run a stitch along the two sides. Okay, so I'll go do that and show us what it looks like. Remember, one will overlap the other. All right, so on the lower part we'll fold it in, but I'll just go and run the stitch, come back and show you guys. All right, so I've stitched it, so you can see what it looks like on the inside. It's super clean on the inside. There are no rough edges there. So if you have any excess thread, just cut that out, and you can see it's super clean and beautiful. So I'll turn to the front, and you see, so this is what it looks like. So one would overlap the other, you can see. So you put your press button here and the other one on the other side, or you put your button here and your buttonhole on the other one. So now I want to cover up the lower part of this placket. So if I just fold it in, the other part will be very bulky, so I'll just cut it out. That lower part, the one under, I'll cut it out, you can see, so that by the time I fold in, I won't have too much bulkiness around that area. So I'll make sure that I tuck in all the sides. Then you can see me tucking in the sides, tuck it in properly. Then you fold it a little bit, okay, and you cover it up. That's just it. So I just use a pin to hold it, then stitch it all the way around, stitch it straight. Okay, make sure that you pin this. I'm just doing repeating this so that you see. Make sure you pin it so you sew straight. Okay, I'm going in with my pin around there, just to hold it in place and show us how you will stitch it round. Okay, so you make sure you tuck in all that other side, you can see. So one is overlapping the other, so just from there you just stitch it round and cross it at the 6 inches point you want for the length of your placket opening. Okay, so I've done that and the placket is laying nice. Then I've also joined the armhole. I've done one side, so I'll just show you how to do the other side. So you can see my placket now. By the time I open it up, you can see. So I'll just attach my snap button or my press button, but for now I'm just using my pin to hold it. After the whole coupling of the bodies, I'll go and attach my press button or my button and the buttonhole. All right, so I've done the armhole, the shoulder for one side, so I'm going to repeat the same process on the other side, just so you see. So I'm zooming this in because I want us to see exactly how I did the shoulder to get a very clean and seamless look. All right, so what I'll do is to open up my yoke a little, just tear it open a little, just so that I have enough room to turn the shoulder. So I'll place the shoulders together, then use one part of it to turn it. Okay, place the front yoke and the front shoulder, the back yoke and the back shoulder, then use the front fabric to turn it. So the back, front and yoke is together, then also pick the front yoke and fabric, then use it to turn each other, you can see. So basically putting the back in between the yoke of the front and the back of the front. Okay, so that's what I did, putting the back in between the fabric and the yoke of the front. Okay, then hold it and stitch it by 1/2 inch, which is the normal sewing allowance we left for the shoulder. So you can see how clean it looks. I've joined the shoulder, it's so clean. So that is how you get a clean look for the shoulder of your senator or any outfit you're working with and you want a clean shoulder finishing. All right, so having done this, so I'm just going to fold my fabric and make sure that all the other sides are matching. So you can now see what we did at the back, that the back has now entered into the front, and that is the beauty of a senator, and that's how it looks. So you just go in with your iron and make sure you iron all of that part flat. All right, so I fold it in. So where you have that shoulder joining is not where you start attaching your sleeve. So after folding, you notch the midpoint of the place you ironed. Okay, after the back has entered the front, you iron it, and that's the midpoint of your shoulder, not the main part you joined. I'm going to trim any excess I have around that point. Okay, then I will get my sleeve. I've already hemmed my sleeve. I've hemmed the lower part of the sleeve, so the center point of the sleeve meets the point I notched. That's the part ironed and forms the middle of the shoulder. So by the time I feed the sleeve round, you can see it matches. So I'll just go and attach my sleeve. Then I'm overlocking every part. I'm overlocking the sleeve and round my fabric. Okay, so this gives you a cleaner and sweeter and better finishing. So try to overlock. We call it weaving in this part of the country, or you can also call it sedging. So this is your sedger or your overlocker or your weaving machine. In my part of the country, it's called the weaving machine, but it could be called the overlocker or the sedger in your own country. So I'm done overlocking all the edges of my fabric, the armhole, the sides. I've also hemmed the bottom of my fabric for the front and the back. I've also hemmed it, and everything is looking very sweet. So it's just to take in my measurements, and that will be all. So starting from the sleeve. All right, so the round sleeve measurement is 10, so I'll just mark 5 inches there, or because the seam allowance I use is 1.5, I'll just mark 1.5 there. Then on the chest line, or where we have the armhole joining, the seam allowance there is 1 inch, so I'll just mark 1 inch across, then stop at the side slit. So you just fold in the side slit, join from the armhole to the side slit, and that is it, guys. So my senator wear is ready. Look at how beautiful this is, guys. I can't get enough of this. So you can see the side slit, you can see, so beautiful. So when you stop your stitch around the side slit, you back stitch, then fold in the side slit and work and stitch it. So look at it, so beautiful, and I've ironed it and everything is looking sweet. So if you like this video, give us a thumbs up, share, like, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.